The man who shot Abraham Lincoln has been dead 10 weeks. Evening, July 6, 1865, a locked courtyard in Washington. An army captain braids rope. Regulation says 7 coils. He ties one with 5, tired and not believing they will hang a woman. Tomorrow, 4 people hang here. 4 more sail for an island in the Gulf. And one of the first men Booth recruited walks free, 2 years on from another court. Something other than guilt decided which of them died. 8 of them are tried together, and none of them face a jury. Not one is allowed to say a single word in his own defense. 8:45 on the evening of April 14th, 1865. A hotel room on 9th Street. 4 men inside. Booth hands out the targets as offices, not people. The Secretary of State, the Vice President, the President, all 3 within the same hour, so that by midnight, the government has no head at all. The 4th man in the room is David Harold, and he gets no target of his own. He is an outdoorsman with an intimate knowledge of the Maryland swamps and the road south. Tonight, he is a guide. First for the man going to the secretary's house, then for Booth. At 10:15, Booth walks into the presidential box at Ford's Theater and fires 1 shot from a Derringer 6 inches long. Then he is gone, out the back and into Maryland, with Harold catching up to him on the road. 12 days later, soldiers corner them in a Virginia tobacco barn and set it alight. A sergeant shoots Booth through a gap in the boards. Harold comes out with his hands up. Booth does not. He is the only one of them who never sees a courtroom. 9 days earlier, the Secretary of State broke his jaw in a carriage accident. His physician had called on him that very evening and left about an hour before 10, with instructions that the patient not be disturbed, which is why the young man at the door at 10 o'clock says he is bringing medicine from that doctor. The revolver misfires on the stairs, so he beats the secretary's son down with it. Upstairs, the knife opens the secretary's cheek. The second blow goes for the throat and stops against a curved metal plate, the brace holding the broken jaw together. A soldier posted to nurse him drags the man off the bed. Across town at the Kirkwood house, where the vice president is staying, the man sent to kill him is at the bar, asking the bartender who guards him. The more he drinks, the worse it looks. Around 10:30, he walks out and drops his knife in a gutter. Next morning, detectives find a loaded revolver under his pillow and John Wilkes Booth's bank book in his room. 3 assignments, 1 carried out, 1 stopped by a piece of metal strapped to a sick man's jaw, and 1 that never happened at all. None of this was the original plan. Since the summer before, Booth had been building something else. A plot to seize the president alive, run him south, and trade him for Confederate prisoners. It died on the 17th of March, when Lincoln changed his schedule, and the ambush waited on an empty road. Killing him was the second idea. Most of the men who will hang for it were hired for the first one. Near midnight on April 17th, H Street. Military investigators are already inside the boarding house, and they are taking the landlady with them. Mary Surratt, a widow of 42 who rents out rooms. Then someone knocks. The man at the door is tall and carrying a pickaxe. On his head is a sleeve torn off his own undershirt and pulled on like a cap. Everything else he is wearing is decent clothing. This is Lewis Powell, who 3 nights ago walked out of the Secretary of State's house with a bloody knife. He says he has been hired to dig a gutter and has come to ask when to start. They ask Mary Surratt whether she knows this man. She tells them she has never seen him before. She is standing 5 feet away from him under a bright lamp. Her eyesight was poor, she said afterward, and the room was dark. Over the next 4 days, they take the rest. George Atzerodt, pulled out of a cousin's farmhouse at 4 in the morning. The man who spent the night at the bar. Michael O'Loughlin, who sends word through his brother-in-law telling police where to find him, so his mother will not have to watch it happen in her house. Samuel Arnold, picked up behind a store counter near Fortress Monroe, who confesses to the kidnapping and denies the murder. Those last two are the men who went home in March. And Edmund Spangler, a stagehand at Ford's Theater. That afternoon, his employer told him to prepare the presidential box. That night, he held Booth's horse at the back door. April 21st, a farm in Charles County. 6 days earlier, at 4 in the morning, a man with a broken leg had ridden up to this house, and Dr. Samuel Mudd had cut the boot off him, set the bone, and given him crutches. Now a lieutenant announces a search. Mudd says something to his wife. She goes upstairs and comes back with the boot. The lieutenant turns down the top of it, and written inside the leather is a name, J. Wilkes. All of this begins before any of them is charged with anything, and none of it stops when the trial finally starts. The men are held in the coal bunkers of ironclad warships below the waterline. The sun beats on the iron decks all day, and the hull holds the heat, and inside it runs past 100 degrees. Bilge water, coal dust, a bucket in the corner. Over each man's head goes a hood of heavy canvas. No opening for the eyes, no opening for the ears. One hole about an inch across at the mouth, for breathing and for food, and a cord pulled tight under the chin. A man wears it in his cell, day and night, for weeks. He cannot see who comes in. He cannot hear what they say to him. On the 8th of May, the prison physician, Dr. George Porter, files a report. The prisoners are going deaf from ear infections, and they are losing their minds. Acting on it, the Army modifies the hoods. They line them with an inch of cotton padding. The padding traps the heat and sweats the skin raw. The improvement makes it worse. Powell, the one who stood under the lamp, stops passing stool at the end of April. It goes on for nearly 5 weeks. At trial, his own lawyer will put that in front of the officers as evidence and tell them it is what a mind looks like coming apart in the dark. Their hands are in what the Army calls lily irons, 2 cuffs joined by a rigid iron bar over a foot long so the wrists cannot come together. A man cannot feed himself without help. A blacksmith drives the rivets in hot. There is no taking them off. The hoods come off on the 10th of June, after 7.5 weeks. By that date, the trial has been running for a month. The man who will decide whether Mary Surratt hangs spent the week before he testified locked in a cell of his own. He rents her tavern in Maryland. Detectives took him on the 18th of April and held him close to solitary, while a captain worked on him about what would happen to his family. He is a drinker. They gave him nothing. By the 22nd, he had made a full statement. She came out to the tavern on the day of the murder, he said. She told him to have the shooting irons ready that night. That statement is the case against her. Everything else is atmosphere. He is never charged with anything. The room is on the 3rd floor of the Arsenal prison, 40 feet by 27. 9 Army officers sit along one table. Only one of them has any legal training at all, General Lew Wallace, who will later write Ben-Hur. The accused face them on a raised platform in irons. Under the law of that year, a defendant cannot testify in his own trial. That is not something this tribunal invented. The same rule ran in the civilian courts and applied to everybody. But here it lands on top of everything else. The prosecution is run by Judge Advocate General Joseph Holt, who effectively controls the proceeding. and when the officers withdraw to decide the verdicts behind closed doors, the men advising them are the prosecutors. Defense attorney William Doster put it plainly. Against his client stood the whole war power of the government, its railroads, its telegraphs, its detectives. His client could confer with him only in chains, with a soldier on either side. Mary Surratt is allowed a cushioned rocking chair. She's menstruating heavily enough that the prison doctor is treating her for blood loss with wine and iron. A second boarder testifies, and he is the reason the doctor is in the room at all. He lived in her house. He was her son's closest friend, and he was arrested as a suspect himself before he agreed to talk. He tells the court that in December of 1864, Mudd met Booth, at a time when Mudd was swearing he had never known the man. Through Mudd, Booth reached local Confederate agents and bought horses. Across 2 days of questioning, Mudd's own account moved from, "I never saw either of these parties before," to, "I have seen John Wilkes Booth." Both interrogators complained on the record that he was evasive. The doctor is on trial for December, and the friend whose house that witness lived in, the son, was not in Washington on the night of the murder. Nobody will find him for another year and a half. The end of June, in closed session. 2 numbers decide who lives. To convict, the commission needs a simple majority, 5 of 9. To sentence a prisoner to death, it needs 2/3, 6. The whole distance between hard labor and the rope is 1 vote. On the doctor, the vote came in at 5-4. That number comes from his own defense attorney, Frederick Stone, recalling it 18 years afterward. 1 more vote would have hanged him. 4 of them get the rope, 3 get the island and hard labor for life. 2 of those 3 had gone home to Baltimore in March, a month before the shot was fired. Spangler, the only one of the 8 acquitted of the conspiracy itself, gets 6 years for helping the killer get out of the theater. Then, 5 of the 9 officers sign a petition asking the president to spare her life in consideration of her sex and her age. Whether those same 5 had voted for her death is not recorded anywhere. What is recorded is that they wanted it undone. The petition is written on a separate page. It is not entered beneath her sentence, where it would be unavoidable. It travels as a loose sheet inside the file. That detail is the whole fight that follows, because a loose sheet is a thing a man can say he never saw. On July 5th, Holt carries the file to the White House. Johnson signs the execution order and no clemency order. Did he see the petition? Johnson said he never did. Holt swore he put it in the president's hands himself, and Holt said Johnson refused her, that she had kept the nest that hatched the egg. That line comes to us from Holt, years later, in a fight he spent the rest of his career trying to win. The evening of the 6th of July, a cell and a woman of 42, with 1 night left. On the other side of that wall, in the yard, a captain is braiding rope. July 7th, 6 in the morning. In the courtyard below the cells, they start digging the graves. At 11, her lawyers get in front of Justice Andrew Wiley and come away with a writ of habeas corpus. It is an order for the army to produce her, alive, in a civilian court. At 11:30, the president suspends the writ. General Hancock carries that word to the judge, and the judge gives way. The last door open to her was open for 30 minutes. 1:15. They bring them out. It is over 100 degrees in that courtyard, and there is no wind in it at all. Soldiers hold big black umbrellas over the officers to keep the sun off them. 4 open graves dug that morning. 4 pine coffins stacked beside the steps, in plain view of the 4 people walking toward them. Mary Surratt cannot manage the steps on her own, so 2 guards take her up. They are seated in chairs on the platform, while their arms and legs are bound with strips of white cloth. It takes some minutes. Nobody in that courtyard has done this to a woman before, and it shows in how carefully they work. 4 ropes hang from the beam above them. One was tied last night with 5 coils instead of 7, and it is hers. Under the platform, out of sight, Private William Cockshaw is holding onto the support post. He was wounded at Petersburg and lost part of a finger there. He has spent the last hour sick from the heat and from what he is about to do. His job is to knock the prop out from under the trapdoor when the signal comes. Above him, the same captain who braided the ropes raises his hands. At 26 minutes past 1, he claps them together 3 times. 20 minutes later, there are 4 plain pine boxes in the courtyard. The white cloth strips used to bind their arms and legs are still inside with them. Their names are written on slips of paper, sealed into glass bottles, and put in the boxes, so that somebody, later, will be able to tell them apart. That same month, the 4 who were not hanged were put on a ship going south. Dry Tortugas, a 6-sided fort of 16 million bricks, standing on a coral island in the Gulf of Mexico, ringed first by a moat and then by open water. Heat, mosquitoes, and a horizon with nothing on it. Officially, this is the merciful sentence, the one that is not the rope. Mudd is a Maryland planter who owned slaves until the state took them off him the year before. In September, a rumor goes through the fort that a black regiment is taking over the guard, and it frightens him enough to run. A crewman hides him under a loose deck plank in the coal hold of an army transport. The search party works the deck the way they always do, driving bayonets down through the gaps between the boards. One blade comes through beside him. He gives himself up, rather than wait for the next one. They put him at hard labor, in leg irons, and into a cell below the waterline that floods with seawater at high tide. From then on, whenever a ship comes into the fort, that is where he is kept until it leaves again. August 1867. Yellow fever reaches the island. The fort surgeon catches it and dies, and there is no one left to run the hospital. The instruments pass to a prisoner, the doctor who is here for setting a leg. He works the epidemic through the worst of it, in a fort where men are dying in a building he cannot leave, and the outbreak stops. When the pardon finally comes, it is the army itself that recommends him for it. On the 23rd of September, the fever takes Michael O'Laughlin, the one man who had turned himself in so his mother would not have to see it. He had been on the island 2 years. On February 8th, 1869, the president pardoned the doctor. 3 weeks later, he pardoned the other 2. 4 men went to that island. 3 came home. While those 3 were traveling home, the court that sent them there was being taken apart. In 1866, the Supreme Court ruled on a civilian convicted by a military commission in Indiana. Where the civil courts are open and working, it held, a military commission cannot try a civilian at all. Justice David Davis wrote it about Indiana. Every lawyer in Washington could read what it said about the arsenal. And the sun came back. John Surratt was one of the first men Booth recruited. He knew the Confederate courier routes through southern Maryland, and carbines had been hidden at his mother's tavern. He left Washington before the shot was ever fired. Canada, England, Rome, where he enlisted in the Papal Zouaves, the Pope's own infantry. They caught up with him in Egypt in the autumn of 1866. In the summer of 1867, they tried him in Washington for the same conspiracy in front of a civilian jury. His lawyers proved he had been in another state on the night of the murder. Which ought to mean nothing at all. Arnold and O'Laughlin were 100 miles away that night too, and the military commission gave them life. Absence from the scene was not a defense in that courtroom. In this one, it was. The jury could not agree. They let him go, and he lived another 49 years. His mother was tried by 9 Army officers over 7 weeks on a raised platform in irons. Her son was tried in a civilian courtroom in front of a jury in the same city. Between the 2 trials, nothing changed about his part in the conspiracy or hers. What changed was the court. The man acquitted of the conspiracy got out in 1869 and went looking for the doctor he had done time with. Mudd gave him 5 acres. He farmed them for 6 years and died on that ground, and his grave stood without a name on it for 108 years. The doctor was pardoned. The conviction was never touched, not then, not since. His grandson gave 76 years to overturning it and petitioned 7 presidents. The last attempt died in 2003, thrown out because the filing deadline had passed. No court ever ruled on whether that trial was lawful. It ran out of time instead. Back in the courtyard, on the evening of the 6th, the hands are still working the rope by lamplight. 5 of the officers who tried her asked the president to spare her. The president did not. Nobody in that machine stopped it. One man in that machine acted as though it would not happen. He built the thing with his own hands, and he built her part of it wrong. He was the executioner, and he was the only one who was surprised. She was tried by a military tribunal. Her son was tried by a jury. Which one of those was a trial?